Hey, hello everybody. It is October 13, 2025, and this is season 4, episode 29 of Two Guys on Politics. Two Guys on Politics is broadcast on the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK AM 690 radio, usually on Thursday morning and Thursday evenings, as well as on YouTube at twoguysonpolitics.com. I'm Ray Hanania, one of the co-hosts, and I'm here with Bill Lipinski, our co-host, who's a former U.S. congressman. And today's podcast, we're going to look at the Gaza War. Is it ending 2 years of carnage? We're going to look at Governor JB Pritzker as he speaks so powerfully against President Trump, but is he failing to do enough to address the challenges in Illinois where taxes are beginning? And what's the solution to ICE, illegal aliens, and the impact on the birthright privileges? We're going to discuss all that and more in this episode of Two Guys on Politics at twoguysonpolitics.com. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back to start the discussion. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski, and this is Two Guys on Politics. And I'm so happy to be here with my very good friend and a man who's got a great deal of knowledge about all political and governmental events around the world, from Washington, Chicago, and Tel Aviv, and someplace in Palestine. My good friend, Ray Hanania.
Well, we're still anchored with your experience. No one has as much experience as you do, Bill, from Chicago awards to the Democratic organization. Some people call it a machine, and Congress, being in Congress, and your acquaintances and working with President Reagan and a number of presidents. So it's there's a lot there. So I know listeners are always interested in what we have to say. So listen, first off the bat, let's talk about Governor J.B. Pritzker, the man who wants to be president. And he has been. I've never liked him. But since this fight with Trump started, since Trump came into office, he has been doing really, really well for himself, how he presents himself. He's lost a lot of weight. And believe it or not, I think people look at candidates, how they look. Are they overweight? Do they dress right? How do they talk? Do they carry themselves well? I remember in was it the election for Charles Percy, I remember his great looks, they said, carried his election victory. And then in the race between Richard Nixon and JFK's great looks and Nixon sweating all the time really kind of undermined him. So image does have a place to play, right? I mean, first of all,
there's no question about it. I sincerely believe that John Fitzgerald Kennedy won that race because he looked so much better on television than Richard Nixon. He could not hold a candle to Richard Nixon as far as being knowledgeable about the federal government, having ideas about the federal government. But Kennedy had that charisma. He looked good. That's why he managed to win that race.
And looks do mean something. I mean, Pritzker has lost a lot of weight.
Yes,
he was
has.
really overweight in the past. And that's not to pick on people that are obese or overweight, but when you're running for public office, it doesn't instill confidence that you can't take care of your own health and weight. How are you going to take care of the weight of the rest of the country? But he's lost so much, and that's been step number one that's changed his image. And step number two is this, like every opportunity. I remember when George W. Bush was first elected president, people were making fun of him, mocking him, like, where's his experience? He was just a college rabble rouser, maybe used some marijuana and a little bit of whatever, some drugs when he was there. And then all of a sudden 911 happened and he was forced to be responsible. And he actually stood up and did the right thing. So his image changed completely too. And I think, don't you agree that this is kind of happening with Pritzker in his fight? He's become the lead voice against President Donald Trump, I think, in the country, far better than some of the Democrats.
No, there's no question about it. He has become the face of the Democrats' fight against Donald Trump. He's appeared on numerous TV talk shows. He's presented himself very well. He's presented his argument very well. Sometimes I don't agree with what he has to say in his arguments, but I think that he has presented it very well.
Oh,
and I'm
yeah.
sure that he has captured the imagination of many good Democrats who are looking for a candidate to run, the next time around. And I would say that other than perhaps the next mayor of New York City, he is going to be the face of the Democratic Party. Ironically, he's probably going to be the more conservative face of the Democratic Party
Right.
than the next mayor of New York City. But I think really it's going to very well come down to the two of them for various reasons as the best shot the Democrats have. Now, I think Pritzker would make a much better candidate than the other guy.
Right.
But, nevertheless, I think the other guy is, he has a very significant portion of the extreme left wing of the Democratic Party behind him. I believe that Pritzker has the more traditional liberal of the Democratic Party behind him. But he's, as you mentioned, he's done a very good job of getting himself out there, making a good presentation, and making himself, a leading contender for the presidency.
Yeah, and every leader always, as they evolve, they always have a wake, like with Zoran Memdani, who I think is going to win the mayoral race in spite of all the machinations by President Trump to interfere with that, getting Eric Adams out, which I think was a good thing anyway. But now he's against Curtis Sliwa and Andrew Cuomo. And I never liked Cuomo. I think he represents what the Democratic Party, the worst of the Democratic Party. But Zoran Memdani, when you look at him, if you really listen to him, I know he was originally portrayed as the socialist in the sense of the word socialism. When you hear it, you right away think of Nicaragua, Ortega, Fidel Castro, all those radicals from the just even way off the scale of democracy.
I also think of Joe Stalin myself.
And Joseph Stalin too. Yeah, him too. And a number of people. But the socialism, when you listen to what Memdani is talking about, he's talking about that he has adjusted some of his views, like he was a big believer in ending defunding the police in New York. He now opposes that. He supports the police. The police are working with him. He says in politics, there's a better understanding of things. And he's talked about what the real problems are with people getting health care, being able to pay for things. So I think if you listen to him, he's going to come over the next few weeks. He's coming across as being much more moderate and not that far left extremist that I think a lot of people thought he was. Governor Pritzker, though, on the other hand.
Let me just interrupt you for one quick moment.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't agree with much of what you just got to say about your Democratic socialist. I think he's going to win the New York election. He's going to be mayor of New York City, but I think he is a Democratic socialist. And I think that many of the things he wants to do are not sustainable at all, because he wants to have free health care. He wants to have free transportation.
We should.
Who's going to pay for it, Ray?
Listen, they do it in other countries like Canada and Israel. We should stop paying foreign countries and put all that money in healthcare for our people. But you're right. I mean, it's an odd, it's off the edge, an off the edge idea.
Well, you go back on Pritzker. Let me just conclude by saying, remember, socialism works well as long as you don't run out of other people's money. Okay.
Well, and again, listen, I agree with that. I just don't think he is the definition of socialism that you and I look at in our generation when we think of socialism. I think socialism, there's a new kind of socialism that has to do with helping people get on their feet. And I really think that that's the part of socialism that he emphasizes, not the communist related socialism that really, like you said, Stalin, I couldn't even imagine anybody being close to Stalin, but I know he's not like that. But
What does he
so,
plan on doing with healthcare? Because healthcare interests me very much. Because I have come to the point where I believe that we need some national healthcare program funded by the taxpayers, which means the federal government. But what
well,
does he talk about?
he has said that no one's looked at what are our options to bring health care to people. He says that, they did it under Obama, but they stopped. And he said instead of stopping, we should continue because the goal is we need to make health care not just affordable, but available, to people. And he says, especially to seniors and the poor, they're the ones that are having the toughest problem with health care. And the healthcare industry, someone needs to look at them and rein them in because the healthcare industry is out of control in terms of their profits and the way they screw Americans. Every people that I talk with, and even myself with that United Healthcare, that's the worst healthcare ever. It makes me sympathize with that Luigi Mangione who turned to crime, and shot that one guy. I don't agree with that, but I certainly understand the anger that he represented against United Healthcare because they made billions in profit, and the people who have United Healthcare can't even get the healthcare that they thought that they were being promised. It's a terrible system and it needs to be changed. So he is addressing that, I
Oh,
think.
I agree with you. And the federal government has to be more involved in all of it,
Yes,
which means it's going to cost you and me more money. There's no question about that. I don't have any trouble with that. The problem I have with it, and even though I say we need national health care, you
right,
take what they did with Obamacare, okay, which I thought was, a step in the right direction. But
right.
you see how much money that program increases year after year after year.
Yes,
That's probably not sustainable either. There's going to have to be a special tax on every single American in order to, fund a national health care program. By the same token, in a country as rich as ours, there shouldn't be people walking around who cannot get health care. And I turn it back to you now.
well, and I agree with that. That's a good topic because one of the big problems and obstacles is the healthcare industry is so powerful. Somehow we have to
Yes,
kneecap that industry. We have to break them because they control Congress. And I don't mean control, but their influence is huge over Congress. And they're the obstacle that we have to overcome. If someone can get past that, then I think we can see the costs of healthcare dropping, not being as excessive as they are. I think the costs are being pushed by the health insurance industry, which doesn't want to lose its stream of money. They don't care what we do as long as we pay them $1,200 for a pill, to prevent you from having AFib. Come on, that's just ridiculous.
but
It's
to a
just
great
not right.
degree, that's the pharmaceutical industry. I mean,
That
there's
too.
three aspects of why healthcare costs so much.
Yes.
Doctors,
Yes.
hospitals, the
Right.
pharmaceutical industry, the insurance companies. That's why it's such a major problem. There are so many contributing entities to costing us so much money for healthcare. Now, I've got good healthcare. I have no complaints about it, okay? And I have a few dollars, consequently. If I need anything extra, I can afford it. But
Right.
there aren't that many people in this country really in that kind of position.
No senior should have to be able to pay more than $40 for a prescription, regardless of what the prescription is. And some seniors, I've stood in line where they've had to pay $1,200 for a prescription. And I'm thinking, this senior, unless they're making a lot of money, not everybody can afford it. But you see how there's so many problems that help Governor JB Pritzker get away from his problems. There's so many
Absolutely.
problems in the world, and the problems with Trump. He looks, I have to say, he looks great as a candidate for president, representing the with the shambles that the Democratic Party's in. He's risen to the top really quickly. The bad part is, of course, his uh, record as governor has been horrible. Illinois is the 48th worst state on so many different levels. With crime is terrible. Um, the economy, jobs, education may be better than some of these other things, but none. He hasn't done anything to address those problems. And I'm not sure if anybody's going to care about Illinois except for the people in Illinois who know the governor and that he's failed to do something. And it's a hard thing to argue that all these new taxes that he's implementing on us, when he is seen as the savior of the Democratic Party, it's going to be hard to argue that we need to stand up for the people of Illinois. I think the people of Illinois are going to take a beating the faster and higher up that Pritzker goes in this campaign. I think the people of Illinois are going to take a beating.
Well, they certainly got to have a lot of new taxes. There's no question about that. And I'm very sorry to see that. And so many of these taxes are what they call hidden taxes. You're not
Right,
really going to expect anything until you get a bill and you say, gee, why is my bill that much higher this week than it was last week? And then when
right.
you check into it, you'll find out it was the state that decided they needed some more money in this area or that money.
Yeah, the worst thing the state did and that Pritzker did was to eliminate the grocery tax.
But
The state was
that was the best thing he did.
no,
I
but now the local governments that grocery tax was being collected and dispersed among all these villages and
Yes.
communities to keep the cost down. So it was done in a way to spread out the money. Pritzker eliminated that to say, look, we're not going to charge that anymore. So now every village, every municipality has been forced to impose their own replacement grocery tax or lose that money. And in some communities, it's several $1 million. Like in Orland Park, where I live, I think it could be as much as $4 million a year. That means they have to raise property taxes or other taxes. And I think what they're doing is they implemented the grocery tax, to compensate for what we're losing from the state. It just was it was an easy way to make himself look good, I think,
I'm sure.
at the expense of us in Illinois. Again, I think that's part of the problem.
Well, by the same token, though, my philosophy is the entity closest to the people that tax the people is healthy because the people can do more about that. If you live in a village that now imposes the grocery tax and you think it's too high and it's not
Right.
beneficial enough, I think you have the power to change it on the local level. Whereas when it was the state that had implemented it, it was very difficult for individual citizens to do something to change it. So I'm for that.
Yeah, no, I understand your point. It's easier to deal with local issues than it is for taxpayers like us to deal with national issues. Absolutely. The other thing, of course, is the continued presence of ICE and the Department of Homeland Security in the Chicagoland region and in the suburbs. You've probably seen a lot of these reports, right, Bill? And Trump has been pushing them, and Pritzker has been the front line against this, even far more than Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. Pritzker has been much
Who,
more effective in responding to
who did you say?
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson.
I wasn't sure we still had one in Chicago.
Yeah, no, I know. And, Brandon seems like a nice guy. And I don't know why anybody would want to be mayor of Chicago because there is no answer to Chicago's problems.
You're
I
right.
don't care who is going to be the mayor. I know Rahm Emanuel is saying he wants to come back, and I'm going, why would you come back unless he just wants his name out there because he may run for president again. Who knows? He's a guy that wants to stay in the politics. But um, we have this confrontation with these raids in different areas, and it raises some conflicting problems. I mean, on the one hand, I think there's nothing wrong with ICE agents and national security, the National Guard being here to fight crime because the crime does exist. I don't believe Johnson and Pritzker when they say, oh, we don't have a crime problem. We do have a crime problem. We do need help addressing it. But Trump, I don't think, cares about the crime problem. He says he does, but he really cares about the politics of what he's doing to undermine Democrats, don't you think?
Yes, I do, very definitely. And I do not believe that you should be able to bring troops in, whether they are federal troops or National Guard troops that have been federalized, unless the governor of the state approves it. Otherwise, I believe it is unconstitutional. And, Trump obviously doesn't believe that, but thank heaven so far the courts that he has had that case come before have agreed. He doesn't have the power to do so unless the governor wants to invite him in.
I did a whole look at that. It was really interesting. Was back in 1963, I think, in the 60s in Alabama, JFK federalized the National Guard, the Alabama National Guard, against the will of the then governor, George Wallace, to fight racism. And to me, I thought, okay, they did it in 1963 when Kennedy did it.
Well,
And
he
then
did it, but
Mhm.
Ray, he did it to end segregation in the South. Actually, it was limited
Well,
just to universities. That's why he did it. And
well,
I can see a federal constitutional responsibility to do that.
Well, what's the difference in terms of crime in federalizing National Guard to address the problem of illegal aliens who are in our
Well,
states and in our country?
wait, wait,
You
wait,
know, you,
wait a second. You did the same thing there that the news media did. You lump immigrants along with illegal aliens. Okay, they're two different
well,
groups.
illegal. I meant to say illegal aliens. Did I say illegal immigrants?
Yeah,
Because I meant to
you
say
said
illegal
immigrant,
aliens. Illegal aliens. Immigrants are legal. They come in legally,
right?
and aliens can come in illegally. If you come in legally, you're an immigrant recognized by this country and should be treated that way. And we'll talk a little bit about all that. But I'm just saying that then again in 1965, LBJ did it again to protect the civil rights marches in Montgomery and Selma, Alabama. He federalized the National Guard again. So they did it twice in the past.
But they were
And
enforcing federal law passed by the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, also then signed into law by the president. There is no national code of crime other than one on federal property. If you're not on federal property, the federal government has no legal right
it,
to do anything about crime.
I understand that if we're talking about local crime, but I don't consider illegal aliens a local crime. I consider it a national crime.
Well,
They
I agree.
violated the Constitution of the United States, not the Constitution of
I
Illinois.
agree with that, and I'm going to leave this subject because we're getting this twisted up as the national news media is.
All right. Well, and
Go
then
ahead.
no, and then the other thing we were going to talk about was, you and I had come up with a plan that I don't know why no one's picked up on it. That if you're an illegal alien and you've been here 5 years or more, they should have a program where you're allowed to stay in the country and apply for citizenship. And if you've been here under 5 years, then you should leave the country and apply and come back in. and that's less disruptive for those people who've been here 10, 15 years, 5, 10, 15 years, that have built their lives here, um, and with families and things. But the other aspect of it is birthright. Now, I am for birthright when the parents are in this country legally. So if you're immigrant or on a visa or a residency and you're not a citizen yet, or you're visiting on a legal visitor's visa, you're just visiting and you have a baby, you should have the right for that baby to be an American citizen.
I
But if
agree.
you're an illegal alien and you've broken the law to come in here and then you have a baby here, I'm not sure that that's legal or should be legal. Maybe under our plan that we talked about, that 5 years or longer, it would be legal. 5 years or less, it wouldn't be legal. But we need to do something about the corruption of the birthright process, which I think has been corrupted by this whole problem with illegal aliens coming in and the broken immigration system that we have.
Well, Ray, what about I asked this question. Two illegal people in this country give birth to a child. Now, that child is born here. So that child is an American citizen, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, no matter how, then his parents are discovered as being here and being illegal. Okay. And the parents have to go back to the country from which they came. Does that child get to stay here, or does that child have to go back with the parents? Now, if the child stays here, you know, and I know,
Yeah.
he's going to become an award of the federal government.
Right.
We are going to have to pay for him being allowed to stay here. His, putting a roof over his head, feeding him, probably eventually sending him to school. Do you think that's right? Do you think that should be okay?
Well, no, see, I don't think it's right because I don't think the system is right. So if this plan that you and I talked about, the 5 year plan, five
Yes.
years or
Yeah.
longer, 5 years or less, if that were implemented, then I'd say yes. If they're under here 5 years, they all have to go. If they're more than 5 years, then they all stay. If for example, if you're an illegal alien, you're here 3 years and you have a baby here, the baby's only going to be 3 years old, maybe 4 years old. So making the baby leave with the parents and then forcing them to apply the proper way to come in to become citizens, I think is not as disruptive. But if you've been here 5 years or more and you had a child and that child now is in school and could even be a teenager, yeah, I think the plan that we talked about would accommodate that situation much better and treat those kids, with respect. But at some point, we have to make the hard decision, because I think even illegal aliens do have a burden. There's a cost burden on our society. And one of the biggest ones is that there's accountability isn't there for them when they're in accidents or they cause damage or they're involved even in crime. It's not the same system. They can disappear, and not get caught. Whereas a citizen who is identifiable and has a record, you could find that person. But an illegal alien who comes in here, even if they've lived here 20 years, they could disappear and do whatever and commit a crime and never know where they're at. So it's a tragedy that's caused by the whole system not being set up right, in my opinion.
No, well, I agree with that. A personal situation I know of, there was a woman who I dealt with in one of the clothing stores that I frequent. She went to Mexico with her mother uh, to visit some relatives. Now, her mother was a American citizen. On their way back, she got stopped. The mother was fine, but she got stopped because she had never become an American citizen. She did nothing to become American citizen. She was always under the impression that she was born here, so she was an American. Turns out that
Wow.
she wasn't. Okay. Her mother never saw to it that she got to be an American citizen. It took us over 8 months to get her back from Mexico. She had to spend 8 months in Mexico before we finally found enough charity in the federal government to say, this girl, from the time she was 6 months old, has lived in this country. She always believed she was an American. She really didn't know a thing about Mexico. And now you're saying she can't come back here? Well, as said, we finally found some charity in the federal government and we got her back here. But that's another situation that definitely has to be straightened out because that, I think, creates more harm to people than almost any other aspect other than all these illegals coming in. I just go back to the Biden administration once again. The Biden administration, to me, was just almost criminal in all of the illegal aliens that they allowed into this
Yeah.
country.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right. And, it just goes to show you that our immigration system and how we deal with this is so broken that these tragedies that we're talking about, these suffering of kids and parents and people and the society as a whole is impacted by the failure of the country to really kind of redefine this, get this done right and resolved. And so far, no one has resolved anything. All
Well,
right,
once
we got to
again,
take.
go
Go ahead,
ahead.
Bill. I was just going to
I'm
say
sorry, go
we're
ahead.
going to take a break, but if you have a point you want to make, go ahead.
Well, a quick point I wanted to make is that neither the Democratic Party or the Republican Party really wants to do anything about this because it's advantageous to them. The Democrats think they're gaining votes. The
Yes,
Republicans believe that they're getting cheap labor for many of their large corporation people. So neither party wants to do anything about it. And until something is done about it by both parties, that we can get it signed into law, we're going to have this system that really doesn't help anyone, including our country.
I totally agree. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about in segment two the Gaza war winding down and end it with a discussion about the need for a new political party, which I think was obvious from our discussion just now. We're going to be right back right after these messages. And welcome back to Two Guys on Politics. I'm Ray Hanania with former Congressman Bill Lipinski, and we just went through a great discussion into the Governor JB Pritzker, the race for president, how he's changed himself, and we're talked a little bit about ICE and the status of illegal aliens and how there's a need to do something about our immigration problems that we face. Now let's switch over to the Gaza war. I mean, in a way, there's finally some real hope that the Gaza war looks like it's been suspended, that there is a ceasefire, and the Hamas is releasing 48 Israeli and foreign hostages who remained from, I think, about 251 who were abducted by the Palestinian terrorist group back on October 7th, 2023. And I think of those 48, though, only 20 of them are alive, and they did return home to their families. And there are another 28 or so that where they're looking for or trying to get the remains of those that have been unaccounted for. And that's one side of it, of course, Bill. The other side of it is that the Israelis have killed some 67,000 people during the past 2 years, whereas Hamas killed, I think, about 1,200. And I think maybe there have been about 1,000 soldiers, Israeli soldiers, that have been killed too in the past 2 years. But during this time, the Israelis have abducted something like, I don't know, 2,000 to 2,500 Palestinians. And basically, nobody calls them hostages, but they're illegally detained without judicial charges without being formally charged with anything. And then there's another, I think, 11,000 Palestinians who are in Israeli prisons who have never been given, a judicial representation, or a fair trial. Some of them I think have, but it's a small handful, like maybe about 300 of them, but the majority of them. So there's that balance that the Arabs and the Israelis are fighting about that may be too nuanced for the American people to understand. But I think the bottom line is that, in all fairness, Trump has pushed both sides, a reluctant Israel and a reluctant Hamas, to accept this agreement that now divides Gaza. Half of Gaza is still controlled by Israeli soldiers, and the other half now finally they've withdrawn from the half along the seaport, the seaside of Gaza, and people have actually started to begin the process of rebuilding the homes and schools and businesses that were destroyed.
Well, I think that President Trump is being given a great deal of credit for this ceasefire, for this possible peace plan working. And I think he deserves some credit. But based upon everything that I have read, it seems to me that there are a number of Middle Eastern countries that have played just as significant, if not more, of a
Yes.
significant role in bringing this to pass. I understand that the peace treaty that was originally put together by the Trump people and then submitted to the Israelis was modified considerably by the Israelis. It was then presented to Hamas, and Hamas was not very happy about it, really, but they said they would take it and they would, look it over, think it over. Well, then that they heard from, I believe it was Egypt and Qatar, that this was the best deal that they were going to get. And if they didn't take this deal, Qatar and Egypt were going to withdraw their support as far as giving them political and diplomatic standing, which put pressure on Hamas. And then Turkey joined in and said exactly the same thing. So three of the most significant countries in the Middle East were siding with the Trump peace treaty. And I think that's why, more than anything else, Hamas has agreed to do so. They have really become more and more isolated. And I give Trump credit for, bringing these people together. But I also have to give a lot of credit to some of these Middle Eastern countries, predominantly Muslim countries, that have seen to it that this war comes to an end. And hopefully it is coming to an end.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I think I think that a genuine peace that could move forward into a broader peace requires the elimination of Hamas. Absolutely, Hamas has to be removed because under the old circumstance, Hamas was controlling Gaza. Hamas was a religious-driven organization, and when it comes to religion, there's no compromise on what you believe in. You don't compromise on God. You compromise if you're secular and you believe that regardless of justice, you compromise to end bad things. Hamas has never been able to do that. But in all fairness, the majority of Hamas, I would say 98% of its leadership has been assassinated and killed by the Israelis. Now, I don't know whether Hamas can even survive. I know that there's still some people out there. I don't even know why it has to be Hamas that's doing all the talking. But once we get past this, I think Hamas has to be marginalized. And I think it's pretty clear in the Arab world, from the Saudis to Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Hamas needs to be out. And the Palestinian Authority, the secular government based in the West Bank, should be given control of Gaza. Whether that happens or not, I don't know because they've tried and it's never worked. But that's the challenge we face. And then the other one is the Hamas of Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu is no different than Hamas. We're talking about a government, not Israelis. You know, I criticize governments all the time, and I criticize Netanyahu's government, not the Israeli people. And because there are a lot of American Jews who are really the majority, I think, in this country who are upset with what Netanyahu has done. He could have done this in a different way, more humanitarian, and still destroyed Hamas. But it was more like vengeance for the far right religious parties who really wanted to see the Palestinians eradicated completely. So this is still tenuous. I mean, it's step one of three steps, as I understand it, and it's still not clear. As you know, Bill, right, with everything with Donald Trump, things he says one thing, and it's not really clear whether it's going to be the way he says it or whether there's an evolution of thought. Somebody that I spoke with this week referred to it as the whim of Jello, Donald Trump's whim of Jello.
Well, I don't think he ever looks at the details. All he does is look at the big picture. Now, Ronald Reagan only looked at the big picture also, but he had people who were smart, who were shrewd, that worked out the details for him and made him successful. I don't think Trump has those kind of people because I don't think Trump has anybody around him who will tell him the truth. Okay. They're
Or
all
willing to stand up to him, right?
right, exactly. That's the way he likes it. Another factor here is that I don't know how you get Hamas to lay down their weapons, quite frankly, but also right now they are entitled to be included in the new Palestinian Gaza government. Okay. Now I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's bad. I don't know if it has to be that way. But I know that Turkey, Egypt, and Qatar all support that because they threatened at one time to say that that didn't have to be. But as long as Hamas is moving along with this peace plan, they're supporting their participation in the government, which would be fine if they don't take to, becoming a military entity.
Right. One of the big problems here is that Hamas in the past has always taken actions outside of government, Palestinian government.
Uh,
They were their own government. They did whatever they wanted to do, and they would initiate attacks. Now, in fairness, Israel would always initiate attacks many times, causing Hamas to respond. So the two of them can sit there and blame each other all they want. But the truth is, Israel's government and Hamas have both contributed to this violence and destruction, each at their own level and in different ways. But if Hamas were to be completely disarmed and became a political party, maybe they have their advocate for a religious state or whatever. I don't think they would be the majority of the political movement of Palestinians. So, and with the radicals leadership almost devastated, Israel has killed them all. I mean, we're talking about the main leaders have all been destroyed. I think there's a chance that the only thing left of Hamas will be its name and nothing more than that. But it has to work with the Palestinian secular government in the West Bank in East Jerusalem. If that happens, then we might be able to see a two-state solution where Palestinians and Israelis, can live in peace. But I also believe it's going to require a change in Israel's government. And I think after this, I think Netanyahu is in trouble. What he did during the past 2 years will not erase, no matter this peace accord does not erase the International Criminal Court charges that have been placed against Netanyahu and his government and against the Hamas leaders, many of them who have been killed. And I don't think they're going to get out of that. And I think eventually Israel might elect a new government that would be more favorable to peace. And I'm hoping that's where we're headed.
well, I think that as much as I hate to say it, two things I want to say. as much as I hate to say it, because I was against Netanyahu in the way he conducted this campaign, this war against the Palestinians, against Hamas. But I think that because of his brutality, quite frankly, it may
Yes,
have finally brought the war to a conclusion. All right. By the same token, I don't think that you can exclude anybody from the Arab world as a possible member of the governing body in Gaza, if you're really going to be democratic about it. Also, I understand that a number of the Arab nations, Muslim nations, are willing to send troops into Gaza to maintain a peace, where the United States doesn't have to be involved,
right.
Israel happen to be involved, and the Palestinian people should feel safer with, let us say, their own kind, being the military wing of what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation. I think it really opens the door, though, to the question of the ineffectiveness of the United Nations. What a worthless organization that is today. The Security Council runs everything, the United Nations General Assembly. It's not the same organization that was created after World War II. It's
No,
completely different. It's politicized. China, Russia, and the United States pretty much run everything, and nothing gets done there because of that circumstance. But it would be, and that's why the Arab countries sending in troops, it's ironic rather than the UN, because the UN has no credibility anymore, in my opinion. So maybe these Arab countries could send people in there. Israel certainly doesn't want to cause a problem with those Arab countries because it still wants to engage with them, moving
absolutely.
forward in a regional peace. So maybe that is the way to do it. They'll be less likely, although that didn't stop Netanyahu from attacking Qatar, which has at a U.S. Air Force base that we have there.
But I
The,
really think that him doing that has
yes,
hastened the end of this
yes,
uh, war, okay? Because I think that once he
is
did that, and Qatar, who's an ally of the United States, but realizes the United States knew he was doing it, they decided it's time for us to put an end to this.
yes. I think Netanyahu's extremist actions have really pushed everybody to look and say, we got to stop this before it gets
Absolutely.
worse, because it is going to get worse. All right, we only have a couple more minutes. I mean, I know you and I both bought Joe Manchin's book, Dead Center in Defense of Common Sense. And, Joe Manchin was a Republican, right? From West Virginia, I think.
No, no, he
And
was a Democrat.
from
He was a
Oh, he's a
Democrat from West
Democrat from
Virginia.
West Virginia who is more of a centrist, and
Oh, yeah, definitely.
he's been advocating for wanting more of a common sense approach to politics to end this polarization that we have. So we're both in the beginning of the book, and maybe we'll talk about it on our next show when we do it next week. But we do need a new political party, and I'm still hoping that the America Party is still a major force that will change things.
I certainly agree with that. I don't know that a third party can ever be successful in this country. It hasn't been so far, but I'm willing to try anything at the present time to end the great divide that in this country, because we cannot possibly really be the leader of the free world any longer if we are so divided at home ourselves. I mean, we're going to need a president who is supported by the vast majority of the American people to allow us to once again become the leader of the free world and do things not only for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all mankind. So I'm interested to see what Joe has to say because he wants to see something like that. I'd like to know how he can see it coming about. And certainly in the very near future, I'll be happy to discuss it.
Yeah, and I think the America Party, as opposed to being a third party, is more of a movement, because what I see happening is Republicans like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, and there are a bunch of senators like Susan Collins and Rand Paul, and I think there's Tom Tillis, who's from, I think, North Carolina. On the Republican side, they've kind of bucked the system a little bit. And on the Democratic side, Manchin, he's no longer in office, but he's still an influence in the Democratic Party. But Mike Quigley of Illinois, there's a Michelle Sherrill of New Jersey, there's a Senator Mike Bennett of Colorado, Peter Welch of Vermont, and Martin Heinrich of New Mexico. These people have been bucking the system. And if they could identify with an American party as a movement rather than a third party, they could deny the Republicans and the Democrats control of the House and the Senate and force the two sides to come together to actually get something done. That's the only hope that I think that might be beneficial.
Okie doke.
All right. Anyway, listen, everybody, thank you so much for joining us here at Two Guys on Politics. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski, and let us hear from you. We'd like to know what you think of what we're saying. Do you think we're centrists? Do you think we're leftists, rightists? Let us know what you think. It would be very interesting to Ray and I to know that. And Ray, thank you very much for this program. I think it was very interesting. I hope it was as interesting to the listeners as it was to you and I.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you later. See you in a week. Bye-bye.